TV Makers is sponsored by RIMS, the Albert-vetted digital releasing platform. Welcome back to TV Makers. I'm Ashley Golder, and each episode I dive into the role of a leading industry professional, uncovering what they actually do, and more importantly, how they do it, so we can learn from their experience before taking those next steps ourselves. And here we are again, a series finale. It's been an incredible run, and we're ending series 4 with something special. Because this isn't just the finale of TV Makers, it's also the finale of Hijack Season 2 on Apple TV. If you're listening on release day, the Hijack finale lands tomorrow, March 4th, 2026. Joining me are the co-creator, executive producer, and lead director of Hijack, Jim Field-Smith, and director of photography, Ed Moore, to talk through what it takes to build one of Apple's top-rated dramas and what gets them and Idris Elba's character Sam into 8 relentless hours of real-time jeopardy. If you've ever wondered what actually goes into making large-scale, high-stakes drama, the level of technical planning, the creative tension, the trust between DP and director, this is your behind-the-scenes ticket. We get into the need to build a full-scale moving U-Bahn from scratch, why second screen friendly might be the most dangerous note in television, how to sustain tension when your story unfolds minute by minute, and why Jim prefers directing without traditional storyboards, and whether that creates chaos or creative freedom on set. And if you're watching on YouTube, Jim, Ed, and Apple have supplied some fantastic behind-the-scenes footage and images, which are woven throughout this episode. So stay tuned for TV Makers Hijack Finale Special right after this. I am so excited to say this series of TV Makers is sponsored by RIMS, the industry's digital releasing platform, and honestly, they're a game changer. Whether it's contributor releases, location agreements, material licenses, and more, RIMS makes it all safe, secure, and paper-free. It's fully GDPR compliant and Albert vetted. I have used RIMS on loads of productions, and it just makes everything that much smoother. So leave your paper releases behind and head over to rims.tv to find out more. Ready to go?
Yeah.
Jim, Ed, welcome to TV Makers, a very special final episode featuring Hijack Season 2. Season or series, actually?
Season 2.
On Apple TV. And for those watching and listening, you will be able to view the finale of Hijack Season 2 tomorrow, March 4th, if you're listening to this afterwards, but March 4th is the season finale of Hijack Season 2. Thank you for coming on to TV Makers, both of you.
Thanks for inviting us.
Seeing as I've got the two of you, if you could describe each other in 3 words, professionally, what would it be?
3 words.
I feel like a relationship counselor.
Yeah, that's tough. I would say of Ed, resourceful, irreverent. I can do 2.
Go on. Let's go for 2.
Okay.
2. Maybe
I'll come back for a 3rd.
3 on the spot.
I'll hear what his are, and then I'll come back.
Yeah,
I'll come
yeah.
back
I've had more time to
think.
think about it.
Verbose.
Nice.
I'll take it. I'd go for visionary.
Lovely.
I'd go for committed, and I'd go for engaging, I think.
Oh, thank you.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Isn't
I need to. I know these are. Well, I'll stick with verbose actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How long have you known each other?
Ed and I have known each other for about 7 years, maybe.
Yeah, gosh, we'll be Litvinenko. We're a mutual friend, Chris May, who's the producer of Jim's show, Litvinenko. I'd worked with when Chris was a first CD, and he brought me this spectacular news that Jim was looking for a DP. So I jumped upon that opportunity, did my best to persuade him, and yeah, here we are.
How did you persuade? I mean, Jim, do you remember how you were persuaded?
For Ed to jump on board Litvinenko,
yeah,
we just desperately needed somebody.
Checked everyone.
He
else.
was technically available.
He was the first person who could do the dates.
No, it was a complicated project. Factual drama set in quite a controversial subject matter, and I wanted to shoot it in quite a specific way. It was also during COVID. So I wanted to find somebody who could be fleet of foot and understand the way that I wanted to approach the subject matter and shoot it in this kind of almost like an elevated doco kind of style, which is kind of where we ended up with it. And the entirety of the show is shot on location. So shooting in central London, shooting with not necessarily available light, but a lot of kind of available light style shooting, handheld, quite intimate material, a lot of it. So yeah, it was just finding someone who kind of could grab that with both hands and run with it.
And we almost immediately, as we started prepping that, Jim, I think, knew that Hijack was happening. So I remember, whilst we were enjoying getting to know each other on Litvinenko, Jim was like, "Oh, but yeah, I think my next thing is going to be this huge show about a plane hijacking." And I really remember you being very fair initially, just being like, just to sort of dispel any like excitement you might have. They'll want a huge name DOP for this project. But it just meant that I had 10 weeks of shooting this project to sort of slightly nibble away.
What an audition for that job!
Yeah, exactly. It was like an absolute dream for me to shoot something like that. And as we sort of got to know each other, better on the set, and how I saw Jim's sort of vision as a director working, it just became clear that we would work together super well on something like Hijack.
Well, what does that look like then? So knowing that you're going to move on to Hijack season 1, I guess at that point, not knowing if a Hijack season 2 would even come out, but alas, here we are, and it's done very well so far. How do you know that you're going to work together? What finally clicked for both of you to go, I can work with Ed, and equally, likewise, Ed, I can work with Jim?
Yeah, like Ed may not have wanted to do it. I mean, I knew that he probably would. He's a giant aviation fan, which was a big part of the appeal, I think. Let's put words into your mouth, but a big part of the appeal for you, but also a big part of the appeal for me. Your key collaborator on a production, outside of the production designer, that's probably your principal collaborator as a director in terms of building that world. And to have somebody that not only knows that world, but actually loves that world and loves the detail of that world, and someone that I can trust to impart that detail into the production without me having to constantly sort of prod for it. I have to spin so many plates as a director and showrunner that you don't want to constantly be on someone's back saying, are you doing this? Are you doing that? And I just knew very quickly, whilst shooting Litvinenko, I knew that I could see that Ed, when we stepped up to this bigger thing, was going to step up and take care of that side of stuff. And essentially we had an extended prep period because, as Ed says, Hijack was greenlit whilst we were on location recce's for Litvinenko. And I was actually standing outside UCL on the Euston Road, which is one of the main locations in the Litvinenko story. I was literally standing with the entire crew when I got the phone call saying Hijack's being greenlit. But I then had to shoot an entire other TV series first. Yeah. And they wanted it like yesterday. Yeah. And so we spent most of shooting Litvinenko, not just shooting this incredibly complex show, but just gently talking about Hijack. And I was able to kind of fold Ed into some of our early thoughts about how we were going to stage it. And Ed was able to say, well, if you did this, then maybe. And it was a kind of an informal prep period, really. I hadn't actually technically hired Ed at that point, but it was
a free prep period.
Yeah, it was, because I literally rolled straight into it. So it was encouraging to already know that I had someone next to me who was going to be able to take on that.
Well, for my part, I mean, it was almost a treat knowing that I didn't think it was on the cards, because it just meant that I could have fun knocking ideas around. And then, I was incredibly flattered when my name finally went in. But for my part, it was very clear on Litvinenko that Jim likes things to look beautiful and dramatic, but not for their own sake. It was always incredibly grounded in how the characters feel. It was photography. He leans towards photography and framing that is specific to the project and the story that he's telling. So with Litvinenko, it looked a certain way because that's how it ought to feel for his sort of creative goals. And so when we started talking about Hijack, and Jim's idea was that we would always feel like we were trapped on this aircraft with the characters.
Do you feel that?
And I think for some DPs, your instinct would be to, okay, but we'll want to probably take windows out and things and all the kind of mechanics of doing it. But for my part, I really enjoyed the sort of challenge of figuring out how to achieve that. And then in so doing, you do feel that restriction. As the relationship sort of developed, it really felt like we were sort of yes-anding each other. I was never sort of waiting to be, told what Jim wanted, but it was always, we were on the same page, just looking at how a scene was being sort of put together, and then one or both of us would find ways to just improve it as much as it possibly could be improved until it really felt like it was singing its own tune and it wasn't sort of just generic TV drama.
From the success of Series 1 moving into Series 2, what was the main difference making a whole new series?
I wanted season 2 of Hijack to feel like a companion piece to season 1 in a kind of yin and yang way. So very early on the creative side, I found myself looking back at season 1 and thinking, what is that world visually, emotionally? It's up in the sky. It's quite aspirational. We did lots of beautiful aerial photography. The plane, although you're sort of trapped in this prison, there's sunlight streaming through the windows. It's Dubai, it's air travel. You've got the classes of the plane. And I wanted season 2 to reflect that and be this kind of mirror image of season 1. So if Sam is up in the sky in season 1, I wanted him to be under the ground in season 2. And that's what took me to an underground train. But the way that I approach every project is that even when I'm writing something, I'm already picturing myself on set, because I'm often the guy that's going to be the guy on set doing it. Like some writers write unbridled by that problem. Yeah. And that's also a great way to be, but I can't not think, but at some point we're going to be actually making this.
So in that respect then, so you created Hijack, you're lead director on Hijack. Are you writing knowing that if you write something in particular, you're creating a world of pain for yourself? Or for Ed?
Yes, although that's a double-edged sword, because I'm also quite a contrary person. And so I'm thinking, I know that will be hard, but I also know how we can do it in a way that's really effective. And so I'm able to potentially put things on the page that other people might be scared to write, or that a producer might say, you can't write that because we can't possibly do that.
Like what?
Setting an entire season on an underground train.
Is that harder than a plane?
A thousand times harder.
Why?
Because in a plane, in season 1 of Hijack, if you've seen it, you'll know that the plane for 6 of the 7 hours of story time is behaving like a regular plane cruising at 35,000 feet. It's not doing anything massively dynamic. So
no one gets off. It's not passing through stations. It's just traveling from A to B, and it's at 35,000 feet. So what you see out the window is quite abstract and lyrical.
Yeah.
And we lent into that. In an underground train, the world is 12 inches away from your window, and the windows are like this. They're not like this, like they are on a plane. And then in season 2, we spend a lot of time in the driver's cab of the train. And in the driver's cab of a train, you're looking straight down wherever you're going. And so just on a technical level, I knew it was going to be really, really tough. And we spoke about it really early on, because I was like, I don't even want to begin this
We met
journey.
in a tube train in the London Transport Museum.
Yeah, we went to the London Transport Museum and we sat in an old Bakerloo line carriage.
And we were like, this is small.
Yeah.
What would be cool?
And the thing is, in TV and in storytelling in general, but it's certainly in TV and film, there is a tendency for people to ask in front of and behind the camera, wouldn't it be easier if? Because film and TV is all about time and money.
Yeah.
And so everyone always leans into, but I know but it'd be easier if we did this. And you hear it in the writer's room, you hear it on set, you hear it in production meetings. And one of the reasons I like working with Ed is Ed will, as he says, kind of yes and with me. I'll say, yeah, but we know we can do this. And yes, it might take a huge amount of prep and a lot of thought. But once we lock that in, once we lock in that methodology, it's going to work every single day for 9 months. And that's going to be worth more than its weight in gold. Because when you set a show on a tube train, every scene is an action scene. Even two people talking, that's an action sequence. You've got SFX, VFX, built a train on a giant hydraulic rig. Like there are no non-action scenes in Hijack. So you have to get it right from the start. You have to set it up right from the start.
Well, let's talk about the set then. I have heard that you did some location filming in Berlin where it's set, but you then decided not to film the rest of it in their tubes, their Autobahn? U-Bahn. And you brought it all back to the UK and built your trains and stock there. Is that right?
Yeah.
Why is that easier?
Because filming on a train, I would say, is probably one of the biggest production nightmares that there is. Because the train is on rails, you can't turn it, you can't really stop it very easily, you can't go back. And I've shot sequences on real trains. There's no lose. You've got to get 100, 200, 300 people on and off this thing. You've got to give them lunch. And like I said, I've shot sequences in other shows on trains, and it's always a nightmare.
So you're talking, it's more about the logistics as opposed to needing to shoot in a different way. Because as again, I understand it, you built these trains almost to like the millimeter.
Yeah.
You could have cheated. You could have built them a little bit bigger.
Look, if we could have had access to a train line in Berlin and a train, there is a world, I suppose, where if it had been hours 100% of the time, we could have potentially done it. But it's just not. We've got to be there for 9 months.
Yeah. It's what 135 days filming, of which probably 2/3 was on the train.
Wow.
So it's your home, and quite aside from wanting it to look good, you also want it to be safe. You want it to be not a massively unpleasant working environment.
And then just scheduling wise, you've got so many moving parts on a show like this. You need to be able to step next door and shoot something else like that afternoon with other casts too, because your other casts aren't available or whatever. So if you were in a real train, you'd have to have all of those people for all of that time.
So there's sort of all these factors. And then actually it does become about cost, because although it is expensive to build a train and U-Bahn stations and tunnels, and believe me, we know how expensive it is now, it's almost definitely cheaper than going and shooting that for 9 months. Well, it is definitely cheaper than doing what we did on location for 9 months, by a factor of 10, I'd say. Like to do all of that work in a real train on location would have taken twice as long, 3 times as long, and would have cost 10 times as much.
I think we wanted it to have a different vibe. In Series 1, the plane is, lit relatively straightforwardly, like we have all been in that world. We did other bits and pieces, but I think with Series 2, Jim was really keen that we push like where Idris's character is psychologically, and it shouldn't, and the photography, the look, the production design, the dressing should all reflect where he is. So the real U-Bahn trains are quite bright, like most trains. You want them to be bright and friendly, and for that time that you're down in those tunnels, which would be quite oppressive otherwise. You want to sort of get away from that if you're designing a real train. If you're shooting a drama on a train, about you want that sort of oppressive feel. And then things like in the real tunnels, they're mostly pretty dark. But for us, if you're on the train yourself, you feel the movement. If you're watching a show about a train journey, you want there to have sort of passing light sources and things in there. So all of those things combined meant that we could create a very different sort of flavor on the real set that we'd never have been able to produce. And we sort of had to, and we were in Berlin shooting little sections of real trains for various reasons. We had to do quite a lot of work to those trains to sort of bring them into our world to match because we did all the studio section first before Berlin. So they were matching to us rather than.
But the credit to Ed and to our art department is that because we modeled our train on a real train, we then went and shot with that real train in Berlin. So we did shoot the train for real, motoring around the U-Bahn network. We had side-mounted cameras on the train. We had up and past shots of the train, aerial shots of the train. And it is, if you go back and look, you can point out where the joins are, but as a viewer, you watch it, it's imperceptible what's set, what's real train.
I mean, I've genuinely been trying to sort of pixel peep and figure out where those joins are, because you also had not necessarily a volume, but LED screens and stuff to make it look like the train is moving when it was in the UK. And I'm genuinely trying to see, okay, maybe it's here, maybe it's there. And I can't spot it.
So it did feel at times like it was designing a theme park ride as much as it was, doing our individual jobs. Like there were so many people involved in sort of making that illusion work, and the really satisfying moment to finally load that train up with all of the cast, all of the extras. As you say, LED screens on the side, interactive light. I mean, next to we did Jim and his monitors, and then next to Jim were like 7 other carts full of different technical departments to make that thing work, so that ultimately where you're in there with Sam and you believe that whole operation is working. Just having the train moving, which was a sort of gigantic accomplishment. It moves in all sorts of different axes.
There was an aspect of season 1 which I think in hindsight was almost like a seed for how we were going to do season 2, which is that the cockpit in season 1 is mounted on a 6-axis gimbal. Nice. Ed and I went up in a helicopter over central London, shot with a...
It wasn't fun. I know it sounds like it was fun, but...
I mean, it does sound fun. You don't like heights?
It was quite fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. And we flew the final route of the final story route of the airplane over central London in a helicopter.
The pilot of the helicopter was talking to the air traffic controllers, and the air traffic controllers were like, "We're just curious what you're shooting." And he was like, "It's a story about where the air traffic controller is a hero." And they were like, "You're approved to fly wherever you want."
Yeah.
I'll use that the next time I need drone permission to drone inside central London.
Yeah. So we shot all this footage. It was stitched together. It was put on the 270-degree volume. We had the axis, the hydraulic axis that the cockpit was mounted on, programs to follow the actions of the plane and where it was flying. And when you were in that cockpit, it was absolutely terrifying. It really and was. We actually had one of the chief test pilots for Airbus come down for a set visit, and we sort of took him for a spin in it, because our cockpit was an almost entirely perfect Airbus cockpit. And he went up and he came out, and afterwards he said, "That's the closest I've ever seen to the real experience."
And they're the ones.
And he said every simulator. Yeah. And he said every simulator, and we've been in those, very expensive full freight aircraft simulators, and then the graphics are basic. They really are. They're like very low quality. But in hindsight, in coming to do season 2, essentially, I suppose part of my brain was saying, well, it just needs to be that. But all the time, the whole set needs to be that, basically.
So is that what you took for the both of you, maybe from season 1 to season 2, is 1, the realism, and 2, making sure that you were filming in a way where I mean, I've seen you say it before, Ed, actually, that you've made sure that the camera can only go where the passengers can only go. Because I guess there could be a temptation. If you're building a train, you could just take off the side.
Yeah. It's the first thing everyone says. Is like, oh, well, this is great because you can remove this wall and the camera
just hang a black cloth outside the window and you're done.
Why was that important for you both?
But because for me, as a director, I don't like to storyboard every shot and have everything planned down to the nth degree, because I'm not just the director who's trying to execute some script. I'm sort of responsible for the whole thing on Hijack. I'm in, from the writer's room all the way through till delivering the show. And so I can't just take a script and go like, okay, I know how to go and make that. The whole thing is much more holistic for me. It's much more of a sort of 360 situation. So I want to build the world in such a way that when we're standing on set, we're not limited by what we can do. And the only way to do that is to build it as a 360 set, and it has to be flexible, and I have to be able to say to Ed, I want this to happen now, and we're able to do it. We're not having to plan that 6 weeks in advance. All of our planning goes up front, and it drives everyone insane because we're having these like weekly, daily meetings about absolute minutiae.
Everyone wants to know, but like, what will we see? Yeah, well, we'll see everything. We'll see the whole train.
So this is interesting. I was going to ask you, Ed, but it looks like you're on board. Jim, if you're not storyboarding anything, not anything, but most of?
Yeah, I would say we storyboard things that are going to require an element where there's either a big VFX or SFX element, or you really need everyone to be looking at an image so they can understand what you're talking about. But generally speaking, I won't storyboard as a rule of thumb.
So if you have a lack of storyboard, and as DP, is that scary or exciting? That sense of prep. I know you just said you prepped everything 6 weeks ahead, but knowing the exact shot that you think will work can be beneficial, and you've got all this freedom.
Well, I think I question how useful storyboards are generally. I think they can be a bit of a safety blanket. I think you can end up with a lot of storyboards that are just like a scribble of like a mid shot, and you're like, well, what does this tell me? As Jim says, it can be really helpful to communicate a really specific, like a stunt or something like that, or something that involves lots of VFX. I do a lot of work in Blender, which is the 3D software. So like on Series 1, I built the whole aircraft in Series 1, and all of the lighting rigs that made it feel like the plane was rotating was all designed in that. So I was able to previs all of that stuff. That's more useful to me because it's the maths and the geometry is all accurate. So, we didn't do storyboards, but I did work like that Jim was involved with, where we would look at like, well, what angles, if we're going to have LED volume type stuff outside the windows, like how tall does it need to be to cover all of the, what's our sort of playing area. But once we sort of agreed all of that with everyone, it was all being constructed, then it's really freeing to know that you can just look at Jim blocks scenes beautifully, always with an eye to, them being shot in an interesting way. But to be able to just know that we can put the cameras anywhere.
That freedom, arguably, maybe your cast actors might not actually be used to. How was, somebody like Idris Elba like on set when they're also wondering, well, where are we going? What are we doing? How are we acting this? And again, there's no storyboard. There's no, I'm not going to say no plan. Obviously, you have a plan, but you still have that freedom. Does Idris like that?
My experience, and this is the other bit of why I try and build my shows that way, is I don't want the actors or the standby crew or the camera crew or anyone to be having to constantly question what we're shooting, or are we seeing that thing over there, or do we have to avoid that, or do I have to sell the fact that this train is moving? What I want to do is, when the camera is rolling, is for everyone to feel that they're just in the closest version to the reality of that scene. You're going to get better work out of your cast if they're not also having to sell some kind of illusion for you, because then they can put all of their energy into being truthful and into trying to find the emotional heart of the scene, rather than also going, oh yes, and then I need to lean this way, and then I need to lean that way, and I mustn't forget to do this at that time.
So for you, taking away the structure like a storyboard, allows the actor to actually act, I guess.
Yeah, and selfishly, it's me allowing myself to play. It's me going, I won't know 100% how I feel until I see the final frame, or what we think is the final frame, with the actor and everything doing what it needs to do. It's why rehearsals are also, I find, tricky in film and TV. I don't do a lot of rehearsals because I sort of think, particularly on a moving train, it's like, we're not going to know how this scene plays out. We would sometimes do a rehearsal with the rig switched off, and we actually stopped doing them after a while because it was basically pointless. Because it's just, everyone's roughly in the right place. But as soon as that rig's moving, that shot that you've carefully planned no longer looks anything like what it looked like.
Right. So these are the positives about the freedom that you've talked about, are all the positives. Between you both, what would you say was the hardest thing about Hijack season 2? Go on,
I'll let you go first.
Well, one of the hardest things about both seasons of this show has been telling a real-time story. Season 1 is 7 hours. Season 2 is 8 hours of real-time drama.
That's right. So you don't skip ahead. You don't
never skip ahead. We never skip back.
2 days, 2 weeks, 2 years.
It's real-time. It's, there are a couple of little artistic choices here and there, but it's essentially real-time. And we lean into that as much as possible. And I'm an absolute stickler for it.
So the hardest bit for you was real-time?
The hardest bit for me is the writing of it is really tough because it eats story. Because you need to constantly evolve and constantly twist and constantly challenge Sam and put him on thin ice. And you're also trying to subvert the viewer's expectations of what they're seeing. You have to water test everything to the nth degree on the page. You have to go like, okay, would that really happen? Okay, it's pushing at the edges of reality, but let's really water test it and make sure that that is the best possible dramatic version of that. We don't always get it right. I'll be the first to hold my hand up and say that. But we're pushing at the edges of what's possible the whole time, and as a result, you don't always get it right. So that's been the real challenge. The technical side, the logistical side, in a way, once we'd figured out how to do it, was the easy bit.
It's because it just made it look really easy.
Yeah, he made it look easy.
I mean, I was going to ask, and we'll get onto your hardest thing in a second, Ed, but that real-time challenge that Jim's just spoken about, how does that affect how you approach it visually?
Well, it's... on series 1, for example, it meant that, every cinematographer wants the light to be interesting and dynamic. On series 1, I did the flight in flight simulation, tracked what the sun path was, and it turns out that on that flight, the script times were very specific because of how the plot was constructed. Like the sun was always essentially the same angle and the same. So you have to find ways to serve both things. You can't jump around in terms of the lighting look. You've got to be able to.
What I did really love, and this is just me geeking about season 1, is that what do you call it? Prophetic fallacy. At some point when things are starting to look up, the blinds came up and the light streaked in, and I was like, "Oh, that was just beautiful." I really appreciated that. That's just.
I was very much looking forward to that because I was like, we can get to see the cabin in a different lighting state for an episode. Well, I think it's very all the shows I've done with Jim have increasingly got technically challenging, and the real time means that you've got to sustain a very slow progression minute by minute of real time what those environments are doing, and down in the U-Bahn line, you're in artificial lighting, but a lot of the show happens, above ground with huge windows and things. And so, you, particularly with this series, we start daytime, we end in the middle of the night. So you're having to do a lot of work, which sort of is not creative so much as just sort of very specific planning that exactly where the sun is meant to be. So it tracks through, and that when the show's cut together, you're not suddenly having the sun reverse backwards. And that's, I'm able to do that on Jim's projects because once he's committed to the timeline, we stick to it.
Okay, let's talk about RIMS, the digital releasing platform who are proudly sponsoring this series of TV makers. RIMS are trusted by the biggest players in our industry, but do you know why? They streamline every release your production requires. We're talking contributors, locations, materials, NDAs, self-declarations, and even audience consents. all from a single platform. You can use a Rims iPad, which makes things quick and easy, but one of my absolute favorite features are the QR codes. If you're in a hurry and have multiple people to release, you can have your contributors scan a QR code, sign on their own phone, and you're done. Dozens, if not hundreds of contributors released in minutes. Rims works online and offline anywhere in the world. It's fast, flexible, and fully GDPR compliant. And because everything's searchable by name, date, location, release form type, post teams can find what they need in seconds. Plus, photos are stored with every form, so matching contributors is actually easy. It's Albert vetted, eco-friendly, and trusted across the industry, so if you want to make your releases a whole lot easier, head over to rims.tv and book a demo now. This episode is sponsored by The Kit House. As a director, I'm always needing to rent kit for my next project, whether it's a fast-paced run and gun shoot or a full multi-camera studio rig. The Kit House has always been my go-to rental house, not just because their kit is solid and reliable, but because they're owned and run by working broadcast professionals. So if I've got a question about a tricky setup or need advice on the best gear to get the best result, they're always there to help figure it out and make the job that much easier. So the next time you're setting up a project and want reliable, brilliant kit to make it happen, pop into their Brighton branch or head to kithouserental.co.uk. This series is supported by Directed by Good, a social impact production company turning great stories into good causes. And what's amazing is they donate up to 15% of every project fee to UK charities. So by working with them to edit this podcast, we've already helped raise funds for some incredible organizations, which I love. They believe every story has the power to do good. So if you want your next project to create real change, get in touch at info@directedbygood.com. So what about your hardest thing? Especially season 2.
Season 2, I think season 2, unquestionably, like the most technically demanding shoot I've done in terms of marrying up all of those different aspects. And, you know, it's a show, it's a real like seat of your pants show as a viewer. But obviously when you're shooting something over that length of time, like it's really hard to sort of sustain that level of tension all the way through. So that's one part of it, is just remembering that the material that you're shooting in the afternoon after you've had a giant sleepy burger at lunchtime, like has to feel...
Wait, there were burgers?
we kept them away from you.
Good.
He works better when he's hungry. You know, it all has to have that just burning sort of flame underneath it all, and you can't ever forget that. But then you're trying to marry together the illusion of the train, as we've discussed, was difficult enough, but we knew it was going to intercut with all of this stuff in Berlin. So, you know, the very first material we shot, you know, we were doing tests just on a tiny miniature set to see if the stuff with the LED screen's working. But then the first stuff we really shot was in the U-Bahn tunnels for real, with like our own little sort of Thomas Tank Engine utility train. I wanted one with a up and down lever, but it turns out that's not a real thing.
Okay. Just for the cartoons.
Just for the cartoons.
Just to work off some of those burgers.
Yeah, exactly. And then we, you know, when we had arrays of cameras, you know, that was difficult because tunnels are dark, it turns out. So, you know, typically array photography, like when we did the Series 1 helicopter stuff, there's particular lenses you can use. It doesn't matter if they're particularly like fast lenses in terms of how much light they let in, because you just need loads that match perfectly. But in the tunnel, I needed incredibly fast lenses, and we needed like 10 of them. So like there was a point where we were finding every single 15mm signature prime in, you know, Europe to make that array shoot work. And then, you know, that I'm working with the virtual production team, with SFX, with the art department, and VFX, just sort of all of those elements going together into making the onset stuff work. And then we go to Berlin, and there's whole sequences towards the end of the show in which we're intercutting between our principal cast in the cab embarking in the studio and them in the train for real, you know, in a train depot. And we're, you know, some of that stuff is technically sort of tour de force in the sense that we've got shots back onto Idris and Christian that it's trains that Spencer, our virtual production guy, like made in Unreal Engine, but without really exact knowledge of how we would shoot this in Berlin. So there's shots of those on the screen, and then we're intercutting to the real ones, which we shot 7 months later in another country, and to see all of that marry up, to bring all of those elements together.
Yeah, there was a moment where I imagine a bit like when they drill the channel tunnel and you've got two drilling machines heading towards each other from infinitely far away, and you're hoping that they touch. Because of the way we needed to shoot the show and schedule the show, we had to plan the end of the shoot. We had to plan everything around the end of the shoot. And so I knew that in the finale of the series, I wanted the train to go from underground to overground. And in the finale, which you can watch tomorrow, the train, this is not a giant spoiler, the train makes its way to a train depot in central Berlin. And that was going to be the finale from way back. And so we had to work backwards from that. And so I said, well, we're going to have a real train pulling into a real train depot. So the train that we build has got to match that train perfectly.
The external of the train.
The exterior of the train and the interior have got to match perfectly, because that's what we're matching to. And it can't, you should be indistinguishable. I don't want it to feel like, oh, now we're in the set. Oh, now it's the real train. They've got to be 100% indistinguishable. And so the only way to do that is to model it on that exact train. So we had to go to Berlin, have that train scanned, have that train measured to within an inch of its life, photographed to within an inch of its life, texture scanned to within an inch of its life, LiDAR scanned to within an inch of its life. Then you've got the art department building that train from scratch, hoping, some of it on a promise, that in 9 months' time, that train is going to be available to you. And there isn't going to be some giant technological shift in the way that Berlin decides to run its U-Bahn trains. They're not going to change their minds about permissions 9 months out. I mean, we all know that that's something that happens all the time. We lose locations more than I would say you lose more locations than you keep in production. We go through. And so there was a huge amount of people holding their breath saying, this work that we're doing now is going to pay off in a year's time. And let's hope it does pay off in a year's time. But also, when we got to Berlin and that train pulled out and we were standing there looking at the monitor and everyone was like, oh my God, it's amazing, it works. It's like, well, of course it works. We've spent a year planning to make it work. It's not an accident. And
I mean, the 3 days we spent shooting in that depot, I think very few units could have pulled off. I was so proud of everybody. It was absolutely tremendous. Like that was
because of the time scale, or
it was a real train depot, and the people there were perfectly amiable, but like they're train people
working.
and not film people. The real trains had to do all the things that happen in train depots. It's snowing in the show, thanks to Jim, which looks unbelievable. But as you can imagine, every single shot there's fake snow everywhere.
Are these one of these things you mentioned, Jim, earlier about like writing something where you know it's going to be a pain in your ass?
Yes,
later?
that one. The snow thing. The snow thing is interesting because the snow thing is like partly a practical choice and partly a creative one. I wanted it to feel cold and wintry, and I wanted it to feel like completely different from season one. And I wanted Sam to feel like he was sort of trapped in this snow globe. So it was, I would say, predominantly a creative choice, but also I knew what our schedule was and I knew when we were going to be shooting in Berlin. And in Berlin at that time of year, it often snows.
Did it snow?
Well, so again, bearing in mind, we've got to film for 9 months before we even go to Berlin.
Yeah.
You have to write on the page that it's snowing because it might snow in 9 months' time. And what you don't want to do is film for 9 months with no snow and then get to Berlin
it's really
and
hard
it's snowing.
to remove it.
To remove the snow.
Yeah. And I think it's really easy for things to, this show's successful for so many reasons, and one of those is just because there's no it's the good version of everything, and it's the sum of all of those parts and then some. And I think if you start taking away, does it really need to be snowing? Does the train really need to be moving? Do you really need to have? It's very difficult to draw a line in the sand and say, well, this below this is the point where the show doesn't function. And one of the joys of working with Jim is that because of his track record, people listen when he says the line is quite high up. Like, we need all of these things for to have the impact that the show will have.
And I guess it helps having Hijack season 1 as a calling card to go, look, we have this visual imagery. We have this look that we're going for. They trust you already, having created such an incredible season 1, and then moving on to season 2. Speaking of the challenges that you've mentioned, for people listening to this that want to step into your shoes, either as DP, director, creating their own drama, whatever that might be, what do you think is the best way of working together for director and DP?
What I would say on the director front is the thing I've learned over many years of doing this, and the thing I've seen time and time again in other directors, the mistake people think as a director is that you're supposed to be decisive and you're supposed to know exactly what you want, and you're supposed to give people firm directions. And you've got to move on quickly, and you've got to make your days. And that mentality drives me mad. And I know where it comes from, and it sometimes comes from production, and it comes from a need to get things done. And also, it's the classic image of a director is, you know, standing there with a loud hailer shouting at people. And as I think everyone who has worked with me would attest, I don't like sets to be shouty or angry. I have a first AD who I work with a lot, Pete Griffiths, who knows exactly what I like the mood to be on the set. He tries to engender that mood. He can play bad cop for me sometimes a little bit as well.
It's a collaboration, not a dictatorship.
That's exactly it. And I think if you are standing on a set shouting at somebody, or if you're in an edit going, oh, why is this not working? It's your fault as the director.
Yeah.
You have had all of the opportunities to put the right people and the right things in place to not be in that position. And if I'm on set and let's say an actor, it's not quite working out with an actor, the performance isn't quite what I want it to be, that's my fault, not theirs.
I totally agree. I mean, we're very different genres, I'm factual, but in the same vibe is if you shout, you've lost it.
Yeah, you've lost it. And you lose the energy on a set straight away. And I know plenty of people who work like that, and I know sets that, and I hear stories of sets that are like that, and it just, to me, it's anathema to creativity. It's like, how can you possibly be creative in that? And so what I'm trying to do is do everything in the lead up to day one, slate one, is let's get all the right things in place. Let's have all of those conversations up front so that when we're here, time is money in film. So that when we're here, we can play, and we can play to the absolute best of our ability. And don't get me wrong, I'm expecting people to bring their A game.
Oh, for sure.
I get frustrated when people don't, for sure. And that is something that I talk to people about. It's like, show up prepped, show up ready. And people that aren't prepped, I know how prepped I am. And I expect people to be as prepped as that too.
You're talking about that mutual respect towards that creativity and working together.
Yeah.
So Ed, would you agree with what Jim was saying? And how do you feel you like working with a director?
I think, when most DOPs start out, you're very concerned about, you just want to make beautiful images. And then, as time goes on, that almost becomes the least interesting part. Like, what I enjoy the most about it is supporting the director, trying to make the best possible version that we can, and to have, no ego about where the best idea comes from. I think, one of the reasons that Jim and I doesn't feel like we have disagreements on set is I don't think either of us put ourselves in a position where we wouldn't listen to a better idea. Often, for example, Jim will work directly with our operator Jono whilst I'm looking at lighting, and we'll both sort of meet up. And I think previously I might have been more possessive about exactly what the frame is. But when you're working with a director who's got sort of complete command of all of the parts that go to being a director, then as a DP, you can just relax, be like, well, where can I fit in? How can I help you tell this story in the way that you want to tell it? So every, as Jim says, every director is different. People come at it with different approaches. It looks to me to be an incredibly stressful and hard job, to which, where you're endlessly being asked to decide everything. You're carrying the sort of, the fire on your own.
You don't ever fancy taking up the mantle?
It's something I'm interested in the future. I've got more cinematography I want to accomplish, but I do think as a director you need to have a really strong understanding of, maybe not to the point that you could step in and do all of those jobs yourself, but if you don't understand exactly what the role of the costume supervisor is and what information they need and what constitutes your A game there, etc. And that can be said for every role on set. It's really important. When all of that comes together, it's beautiful. And
just to speak on the director DP relationship, I think that one of my main jobs as a director is to be the audience, and part of being the audience is to have the whole story in your head and the whole vision for what the show is in your head, so you can convey it to the audience. Because not everybody on set, in fact, nobody else on set will have that. Nobody. And the DP certainly shouldn't have all that in their head. So for me, I want to be able to say to Ed, I need this to be this. And I can continue and say, because X, Y, and Z. But when there's an element of trust there, I don't need to say the because bit. And Ed will trust that I'm saying that because I know what I've got. There's a reason. I've got an oversight that maybe he doesn't have. In the same way that Ed has an oversight of the camera department and the lighting department and a bunch of HR and professional responsibilities that I don't have at all, and neither would he burden me with those. It's our job to meet in the middle and me to say, Ed, the story is this, and I need it to work in this way.
I think that's one of the things that I love about our industry is you have to work with so many different people, and you start learning the skill of how to work with so many different people so quickly. Moving on, we are seeing more in the media that we're hearing streamers especially are wanting our shows to be a little bit more second screen because apparently audiences' retention isn't very good. Obviously, Hijack doesn't hold to that. It's very gripping. The tension's always there. I never once felt like I needed to reach for my phone. So I think the question is did you get any of that direction from Apple? And if not, how did you make sure that you kept tension on screen to make sure that audience's attention stayed?
The second screen thing is pervasive and deadly to art and to culture. And I think, it becomes iterative. It becomes self-perpetuating. If you make shows that are a bit second screeny, which is an awful word, but if you're getting notes to make the show a bit more second screen friendly, you are creating the problem.
Yeah. Did you get those notes from Apple?
No, I should say up front, absolutely not. I think, when we made season 1 of this show, it wasn't obviously at the point where we made season 1 the success that we knew it was, that we later understood it to be. So when you're making season 1, when you're making anything, for me, speaking for myself, I'm just setting out to make the best version of that story that I can tell with the time and the money and the people that I have around me. If your storytelling is not holding people's attention, that may be to do with your storytelling. But if you try and second guess where an audience are going to get bored, or you try and head them off from getting bored, you're on a hiding to nothing. And I think the moment you start giving notes on scripts or on edits that are about panicking that you will have lost someone's attention, I think you're making the wrong project in the first place. Because if that is your platform and you know that your audience behaves like that, then don't commission that project, and certainly don't give that project those notes. Because my patience for that stuff is at probably an all-time low, I'd say. And I've learned over the years to deal with notes in various different ways. If I ever get notes that use the word second screen or hint at the phrase second screen, I would ignore or refute that note immediately.
I mean, let that then be a warning for any future streamers wanting to employ creativity.
Listen, I think since the beginning of time of making film and TV shows, you get notes about like, can we get into this story a bit quicker, or can we take a bit of weight out of this story, or the first movie I made was this movie called She's Out of My League, and I remember when you make a movie in America, there's a DGA movie, you get what's called a 10-week protected cut, and so for 10 weeks you can cut the movie without interference from anybody. Brilliant. And at the end of that 10 weeks, you're allowed to have what's called a recruited screening, where you put it in front of a test audience, and it's the director's cut screening. So you can put forward your cut and you can get that audience feedback before you present it to the studio. That's the system. DreamWorks were very respectful of that, and they said to me, you have your 10-week cut. We will absolutely not interfere with that. We're not allowed to, but also we don't want to. But we would like to know, how long is it? And I said, well, it's, at the minute, I think it was, at the time they asked me, it was around 100 minutes long or something. I said, it's about 100 minutes long. The test screening is going to be the cut's going to be about 98 minutes long, something like that. And they said, right, but it will be 90, won't it? And I said, well, yeah, it'll be, 90 something. And they were like, no, the final cut of this movie will be 90 minutes long.
In today's world, that actually feels so short when you're seeing 3-4 hour films now.
So my point being that there's always been, since the beginning of time, some version of the algorithm in people's heads. What you hear now is the algorithm tells us this. Yeah.
So moving back to Apple and hearing that they gave you the freedom to make the show that you wanted to make without those notes about second screen, then what did you employ? Obviously, the storytelling is a massive part. The writing, the little switchbacks or the fakes that you had in Hijack season 1 and what we're seeing in Hijack season 2, phenomenal. Creatively though, or visually, or pacing, shall we even say, what are you both doing to make sure that you are still retaining audience, still retaining pace, especially as you mentioned earlier, that you are seeing something in a real time perspective? There's 8 hours is Hijack season 2. 8 hours. 8 hours is a long time to keep a story going with no time jumps. What are you doing to keep our attention?
Well, I'll let Ed speak to the how to achieve it. But what I wanted and what I want and what I need to make that show is to be able to exist. Just to pick one environment, the sort of main precinct of this show is the train. And I want to be able to shoot scenes in that environment. I want to be able to hold shots on characters. I want to be able to move with characters through the space. I don't want to be restricted by, well, it's a train, so you're going to be able to shoot this shot this way, but then we're going to have to break it and go do this another day or whatever. So my whole outlook to create tension is I want to be in the edit knowing that I can hold a shot for, not infinity obviously, but I can keep a moment going longer than maybe it is on the page. And I also often need to be able to create moments in the edit out of things that weren't necessarily 100% designed for that purpose. So I'm trying to get the actors and Ed and everyone pointing towards how can we sustain the moment for as long as possible on the day, because that will enable us to sustain it for as long as possible in the show, which obviously throws up a bunch of production challenges, which I'll let Ed speak to.
I think it's about respecting the audience's attention in the sense that the way Jim blocks edits is not like, look at this thing, like things play out. There's detail in there that's not always evident to me when I'm shooting it, looking at the mic, you're looking at so many different aspects, but all of the story elements are there in the frame, and it's about building it all together. And it makes me think of, there's a story, I can't remember the cinematographer of Chinatown, but he talks about when that was being, there's a scene where Faye Dunaway's in a bedroom, and he says he's shooting it, and she goes round, and he was saying to Polanski, I'll just track this way to reveal where she is, 'cause she's sort of half in and out. And it's, don't do that. And then you sort of watched the premiere and just saw the whole audience just lean in their seats because it's command of like telling a story. It's engaging.
Yeah.
It's making people have to reach for it. I think if you spoon feed the audience, then of course their reaction is going to be like, oh, I think my mum's just WhatsApp me.
Yeah.
If you make them work for it, these are we're no longer at the point where people are running out of the cinema because they think a train's going to come through the screen. Our audience is incredibly savvy media consumers. They understand all of this. They're watching this, but we're standing on the shoulders of filmmakers for the past decades in this type of material. So I think if you just take the view that your audience are smart, then you're going to make shots and frames and stories that lean towards that.
I'll move on to, before we wrap up then, have you enjoyed working on Hijack season 2?
I think when we were making season 1, you're all in making a show. You're not thinking about it. Certainly season 1 was intended to be a one and done limited series. And we got quite near the end of principal photography. And then there was an ending to season 1 that was a lot more final.
Okay.
On the page, and we got a call saying, like, could it be a bit more open-ended? And I was like, oh, why?
Yeah.
So it was a bit of a hint that maybe they were having thoughts about doing more of it. And to be fair to Apple, this was prior to the show coming out. So the faith that they had in the show, in what they were seeing in assemblies, they hadn't even really seen cut episodes yet. They were just seeing footage, assemblies, and so on. They were seeing something that they realized was really working for them.
And that's so rare at the moment. It's
very rare for people to put their cards on the table like that. And so we went away and were like, doing more of this show, it was not something we'd ever considered. And of course, I'm still also just trying to finish the show.
Yeah.
But there was a sort of weird situation where I never stopped making the show because I was finishing up season 1 and we were trying to figure out what season 2 would be. And so for me, it's actually been a continuous journey. There wasn't okay, there's season 1, put that over there. Right, now we're going to start thinking about season 2. It's actually been one continuous line.
Well, you know what then? That moves me beautifully onto almost my final question. Now, of course, the finale for season 2 is going out tomorrow, March 4th on Apple TV. So without giving away the ending, Jim and Ed, if season 3 came knocking, 1, would you do it? And 2, where would you put Sam, Idris's character, in next? We've had a plane, we've had a metro. What next?
Well, look, I think to answer that in sort of pieces, I'd say I'd love to work with Ed again, and I'd love to work with most everybody that worked on the show. I had a great creative relationship with Apple, with my fellow producers on the show. A lot of the cast, Idris and a lot of people in the cast, I can imagine doing future projects with. In terms of Hijack itself, what has been amazing is to make a show that connects with a global audience and to know that it's connecting with a global audience. And the trick of season 2 has been to try not to drop the ball on that. To have the ability to do that again is one thing, but to have the confidence to not drop the ball again is another thing. And I think the reality is with doing more of any show is in the same way that transitioning from season 1 into season 2, none of us wanted to do it unless we could figure out a good hook and a good reason to come back that wasn't just, oh, well, it was a big hit, so we should do more of it. Like, I've got to spend 2 years making that. So it's got to be something that I believe in and can have a vision for that isn't, I'm not going to lose my way halfway through. I knew straight away I wanted to set it on an underground train and I could picture what that would look like. Ed and I had very early conversations about how it would feel and and that's not just about how we want it to look. It's about how much fun we want to have making it. So that's about lens choices. That's about crew choices. That's about looking at visual references. That's about going and experiencing this stuff in real life and going, oh, that's fun. Let's do that. And then I can put that on the page and then that can become the show. As you talk to me now, I can't think what that thing is, and everyone enjoys saying to me, oh, season 3 has got to be on a boat, or season 3 is going to be on a hot air balloon or whatever. And I think any of these things are possible.
Yeah,
the character is is great. Idris is great. He's the kind of sort of ground zero of the show. And so, if it's going to come back, it's got to be him. And from my point of view, if it comes back, it's got to connect to the work that's gone before. I only just finished making this season. I mean, literally in the last couple of weeks.
Little sleepy sleep.
Yeah, I might have a little nap, and maybe that's what season 3 is. Maybe season 3 is Sam Nelson has a nap and tries to stop various things from preventing him from having a nap.
Brilliant.
I tend to be quite contrary, so I tend to lean into like, what's the most perverse thing we could do with him? Could we have him locked in a porter cabin or a portaloo for 6 hours?
Can't wait.
Or is he on the International Space Station?
Only be filming where the camera can actually be in a portaloo.
Yeah.
I'm sure
great.
Idris Elba would relish that opportunity.
but and also I want to be able to say to everyone, this is what we're doing, and I want everyone's either to go like, oh God, okay, or for their eyes to light up. I don't want anyone to be like, okay, yeah, that sounds like something we could do. It's got to feel for everybody involved, this is going to be a major undertaking, and we're going to really relish doing it.
Well, Jim, Ed, I want to say thank you for your time. Thank you for coming on to TV Makers. Best of luck for the finale of Hijack Season 2 going out tomorrow, March 4th.
Can't wait to find out what happens.
Me too. I cannot believe I managed to get through this whole interview without hearing any spoilers. So
yeah, I've been treading very carefully. But yeah, hopefully if you've stuck with the first 7 episodes of the show, we really threw a lot at the finale, and it's hopefully it's satisfying. It was hugely satisfying to make and to finish it up. So yeah, I'm just excited to see what people think.
I can't wait. Thank you for coming on TV Makers.
Thank you.
And that was Jim Field-Smith and Ed Moore, and what a way to close Series 4 of TV Makers. If you like this episode, please give it a rate or a comment wherever you are right now. Before I sign off, I want to say a genuine thank you to every guest who gave up their time this series, whether you're running global dramas, shaping commissioning strategy, leading heads of department, navigating access, fighting for freelancers, or building indies from the ground up. Thank you. You were open, you shared insight you didn't have to share, and the ever-growing archive of conversations that now exist on TV Makers because of that is something I'm incredibly proud of. And of course, thank you to you, the listeners and viewers. If you've watched on YouTube, listened on audio, shared an episode, sent a message, or recommended the show to someone in the industry, you've helped build this. A final thank you as well to our sponsors. Without their support, we wouldn't have been able to make the leap to visual and sustain the show at this level. So a huge thanks to Rims, The Kit House, and Directed by Good. Now we'll be taking a short break while we record Series 5, and I want to hear from you. If there's someone you think we should speak to, or a role we haven't unpacked yet, get in touch. You can email podcast@tvmakers.co.uk, DM on Instagram @tvmakerspod, or find me on LinkedIn. But for now, thank you for being part of Series 4, and I'll see you soon for Series 5. Take care.